some point you're with an ABC News team in Sarajevo. 1 minute you're in New York doing the news. The next moment you're traveling to Sarajevo to cover just a brutal Bosnian civil war. And as we think about reaching our potential to be the best that we could be and doing everything we can to get ahead, we're sometimes asked to do things that are not in our comfort zone. In the case of reporters, that often means going to dangerous places in the world. Were you going out to cover the Bosnian Civil War to see what it was like as a journalist, to be on the front lines and get a firsthand experience of war? Or were you going because you thought you needed it to get ahead, or because your bosses told you that you're going and you didn't really have a choice?
I'm ashamed to say it was my idea. And I'm ashamed to say that it was a stupid idea. And with the benefit of hindsight, we really probably never should have been there for that particular story. It was a story about an American businessman named Milan Panic, who was in former Yugoslavia, who was trying to save the country as the prime minister of that country, an American businessman trying to save the country from this terrible civil war. And we went to do a profile of him, which seemed like a good idea at the time, but it ended up costing the life of a 45-year-old producer named David Kaplan, who was Sam Donaldson's producer for many years. They had covered wars together before. They had been in all kinds of hot spots together. Sam was the anchorman of Primetime Live and was the longtime White House correspondent, famous for shouting questions at Ronald Reagan. "Hold on, Mr. President," was his signature line. And we ended up landing in Sarajevo on a military plane, and we ended up separating into different vehicles. Sam went in an armored personnel carrier with Panic up ahead, and we went behind in a VW minivan, thin skin, no armor. And David chose not to wear a flak jacket, a bulletproof vest. They had been supplied to us. I had one on, but Sam and David chose not to wear them. It was a very hot day in August of 1992. And in an area of Sarajevo called Sniper Alley, which was well known for being very dangerous, where different sides, the Bosnians and the Serbs, would shoot at each other in this area with snipers with deadly accuracy. We heard a loud noise, and David was shot and killed by a sniper. Bullet came through the back door of the VW, through the back seat, through him, and then lodged in the driver's seat. And we moved as quickly as we could to get to a French combat hospital that was located in the basement of the post office building, where French surgeons worked on David and transfused a lot of blood, and they could not revive him. And afterwards, a French surgeon said that even if he had been injured right in front of a hospital in New York City, he would not have lived, because the bullet that pierced his back and went through his body severed the artery that branches right into the lungs. And so it was not a survivable injury. And it was a brutal, brutal day, and we all feared for our lives that moment. And it was traumatic, obviously, coming back for the family. And to this day, I always think in August about his wife and his parents and his siblings and his nieces and nephews, and the incredible loss on that day for a story about a American businessman trying to help a country. And was it worth it? And I think in the end, it wasn't worth it. It was a terrible loss, and it was misguided. Why did we go? We went because that's what journalists do. They go places, and they go to dangerous places. And why do we go? We thought we had a really good story. And I think that as I moved on in my career in journalism, I was 29 at the time. As I moved on in my career in journalism, I was always the person who would ask more questions than anybody else about, should we go forward into that situation? Does the risk reward ratio work out? And I think that many of my colleagues at ABC News would tell you that when I ended up running Good Morning America, or when I ended up running ABC News, I was the guy who interrogated our teams as they were heading into Syria, or interrogated our teams as they were heading into Tahrir Square in Egypt during the Arab Spring. I spent so much time interrogating our teams about the rewards versus the risks. And we thought through the risks, because I had seen at a young age firsthand what happens. It's not make-believe, it's real. Those bullets are real. real things happen and real lives can be upended by a certain decision.
I mean, how traumatic. I'm sorry that happened. Did you come home right after that?
We came straight back. We were on the air that Thursday night doing the hardest piece of journalism and report that we've ever been involved in, any of us. We had to go on the air the night that David was killed by the sniper. And when we were finished the next morning, we didn't sleep that night. The next morning, we flew back to the United States, and I took an extended leave from ABC. And Roone Arledge, the then president of ABC, was generous with me at the time. And I didn't know him and had never actually met him before, but he and the news organization arranged for me to get some help here in Los Angeles with an expert at UCLA who is one of the world's leading authorities on helping people with non-Vietnam post-traumatic stress. And so I spent some time working with him on some of the memories of that experience and trying to deal with them. And I'm grateful to Roone and to ABC for having given me that time to work through what was a harrowing experience. David and I were sitting shoulder to shoulder in the backseat of that vehicle. David and I were right next to each other when that bullet came through the back of the car. But for a few inches, that bullet was in me. I was told later by one of the war crimes investigators who looked into a lot of these events in Sniper Alley, there had been a bounty that had been put on journalists' heads. And if you were a sniper who killed a journalist, you got an extra bounty, you got extra money. And our van was marked TV, meaning you knew that we were journalists, we were TV, and the van clearly indicated we were television. And so some sniper out there made the decision to take that shot. There were three of us sitting in a row in the back seat. There was a guy who worked for the prime minister. There was David in the middle, and then I was on the side. I remember distinctly getting into the van, thinking that David was in the seat that probably would be the safest, because I thought that if we were shot at, we would be shot through the side windows, because a CNN photographer named Margaret Moth had been shot through the side window and shot in the face, and her jaw had been shot off, and she had survived, but had experienced a terrible injury before we had gone there. And it was fresh in my mind as we went into the city, into Sarajevo through Sniper Alley, that those bullets could come in through the side windows. It never occurred to me they could come in from behind. But I was told by a war crimes investigator that a lot of the shots actually came from behind, because if you're shooting at a vehicle moving away from you and you want to hit something, if you aim for the middle, if the vehicle moves right or left, if the wind gusts right or left, if you aim for the middle, you're going to hit something right or left. You'll hit somebody. And so the thinking is that the best shot was to shoot in the middle, and then you'd hit something on either side if you didn't get the guy in the middle. And so it was a very traumatic experience, traumatic for the family, traumatic for ABC, traumatic for our family. And it took quite a while to get through it.